Black History Month is becoming one of the great achievements of Black people in Britain. This is an American import, this idea. It was born as Negro History Week in 1926 in the United States, the brainchild of the African-American historian Carter G. Woodson. In America, it's celebrated in February, not October. And in 1970, it was renamed Black History Month, and then in 1987, it crossed the Atlantic and came to Britain. But I think you can see how much has changed when you remember that when it came to Britain in the late 80s, it arrived in a very small, very modest way. It was celebrated by one local authority in one city, the Greater London Council. And when this American concept first arrived in Britain, it arrived full of American content. And so often there was more discussion about Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Rosa Parks than about Black British history. Over recent years, Black British History Month has changed and it has become truly British. And that transformation in the past 34 years means that today it is part of the calendar of thousands and thousands of British companies and corporations. It's part of the calendar within universities and schools. It is part of life in Britain. And yet we don't often stop to think about the month itself rather than the history that it celebrates. Black people in the UK are around 3.3% of the population, around 2 million people. And the history that is marked in Black British History Month is one that for centuries was largely written out of the national story. Before Black History Month was possible, a great act, a great wave of archival salvage had to take place. Black British history had to be created before it could be celebrated, because nobody had ever gathered it together. The lives of Black British people that we know and that we celebrate today were lost in the archives, scattered in documents. Someone like Mary Seacole, who today is well known, her biography was out of print. The documents that relate to her life were barely known. Her grave in London was overgrown. It was only discovered years later by a group of Jamaican nurses training in Britain. The portrait of her, painted during her elderly years, was in a private collection, just forgotten about. It was just a picture of an old Caribbean lady that nobody could identify anymore. For Black history to exist, it had to be created, and that's only been the work of the past 50, 60 years. It's not, I think, surprising that Black History Month begins in 1987, when it's 1984, just 3 years earlier, that the first big comprehensive book about the Black presence in Britain, Peter Fry's book Staying Power, was published. Black history in the UK was relatively new when Black History Month was created. And it is astonishing to think that the 492 people from the West Indies who arrived on the Empire Windrush and made their homes in British cities did not know that they were simply the latest chapter in a much, much longer story. They did not know that they were making their homes in cities that had been the homes to Black Victorians, Black Georgians, even Black Tudors. Those early migrants who settled down in Liverpool or London or Bristol, they didn't know that those cities had had communities before them. Black Londoners didn't realise that 500 years before they arrived, London had been home to John Blank, a Black Londoner who was trumpeter to the court of the Tudors. A man who probably came to Britain with the entourage of Catherine of Aragon, who was there at the funeral of Henry VII, there at the coronation of Henry VIII, the man who was given a wedding gift by Henry VIII, the man who negotiated a pay rise from Henry VIII, a man who not only appears in the documents telling us something about who he was, his personality, his role within that court, he also appears pictorially. There is a picture of him in the Westminster Tournament Roll of 1511, showing John Blank, the trumpeter to the royal court, the first Black Briton, the first Black Londoner, whose name we know, whose biography we have fragments of, and whose face we can see. All of this was lost. All of this was forgotten. None of these stories were available to the people who got off the Windrush in 1948. So Black British history had to first be built, created, gathered together, written into books, forged together into teaching materials, for it then to be made public to the wider public. And that's where Black History Month comes in. Black History Month has been a vast 3 decades long work of public history. It has taken a history that was lost, marginalized, sometimes deliberately erased, and made it available not just to Black people, but to the whole country. It's an amazing achievement and we should celebrate it.